With the extreme popularity of the Lost TV show, society has rekindled the relationship it built with Gilligan and crew decades ago. Thus, the deserted island video game like Lost in Blue was spawned. Konami cranked out the second installment with no time to address criticisms leveled against the first, and it looks like that's the case once again with Lost in Blue 3. Just like the first two games, Lost in Blue 3 begins with the protagonist washed up on a beach, stranded on a mysterious and seemingly deserted island. You can choose to play the game as either a male or female, with each having its own perspective on the situation. No matter which character you choose, the plot remains the same. After you find shelter, you begin exploring the island looking for ways to escape, and you end up stumbling upon more than anticipated. The story does a decent job of aping Lost, the TV show, with the supernatural element and dangerous island natives. The problem is that the exposition unfolds so slowly that it becomes impossible to tolerate the game's issues. The primary single-player quest is dubbed Survive Together. You begin by choosing one of two characters and then attempt to keep breathing as long as possible. While it would have been nice to have a two-player cooperative quest, instead, you have the option to play the various mini-games via local wireless. Aside from a frivolous time-based survival option, that's where the gameplay options end. Even so, the quest is quite meaty for a handheld game, as you'll get well over a dozen hours of play from the card. If you can stand it for that long. Survive Together plays very much like The Sims. Both you and your partner have a series of needs that must be fulfilled at all times. If you allow them to sink to zero, your overall health points deplete. Caves act as your home, and while you can cook and store items, you won't have to worry about cleaning the place up. Eventually, you'll run into other castaways and move into new caves, and you'll have to maintain their happiness as well. Lost in Blue 3 provides a robust quest to play through, and while you can experience it from multiple perspectives, the game doesn't change much. Unfortunately, all the content in the world is worthless if the game's no fun to play. The gameplay primarily consists of running around the jungle, navigating its various hazards, trying to find clues, collecting food, and drinking water. Having to maintain the happiness of your partner can become a real pain. No matter how many times you take them to the water, right outside the cave, they'll never be able to find it themselves and quench their thirst. Instead, you have to take them there each and every time. And this is magnified when you add more castaways to your party, because you also can't take all of them to drink at once. This is made more confusing by the fact that you can send them out to collect food or run other errands, they just can't do it for themselves. Backtracking across long distances is common, with specific triggers employed that make you go back to the cave even if you're prepared to move on. Toss in the fact that your character will begin moving incredibly slow if their food and drink levels dwindle, and it can be an exercise in patience. The DS is put to decent use, though there's not much here that wasn't included in the first two games. You can spear fish, cook food, and build fires like any true survivor using the stylus and microphone. You can also create tools and objects from items you find scattered around the island, and these portions of the game would definitely benefit from a bit more instruction. The activities can be fun at first, but you have to repeat them so many times that they quickly become routine. Your fellow castaways can take some of the burden off of you, and some of them excel at particular activities, like females being great at cooking. It's not politically correct, but you won't mind not having to play the cooking minigame again. If we were to describe the gameplay in Lost in Blue 3 in a word, it would be tedious. Initially, it can be a great deal of fun when you're first discovering everything, but it's far too rigid, and you eventually realize that you spend so much time maintaining your comrades that you have little time to do anything that's actually fun. While the series hasn't improved much from a presentation standpoint over the years, Lost in Blue 3 is still a decent-looking 3D game for the DS. The animation is fluid, and the locales are generally worth seeing. Texturing is rather primitive, and some of the levels blind you to what's going on, which is a huge no-no in a game built around hunting and gathering. The audio fares about the same with a decent variety of well-mixed sound effects, but a lack of speech and repetitive music brings it down. Lost in Blue 3 is one of those games that starts off well, but eventually you realize that its mundane elements are never rectified, and it becomes a grind. There are so many logic issues that after a few hours your disbelief will be completely unsuspended, and you won't care if the castaways live or die. It's disappointing because you can see that there's a compelling game lying underneath the tarnish, and it's even more frustrating that the same issues keep popping up in every installment.